Tonight, we're going to be talking about creating expectations for the home environment. I'm Sarah. I have my master's in special education and early childhood, and I'm also a board-certified behavior analyst, and I'm the clinical director at the Pingree Autism Center of Learning. So the first thing I want to talk about is why we're doing this training. We want to give you the tools to create a more positive environment that's focused on the behaviors that you want to increase. I know a lot of times when I talk to parents, they encounter a lot of challenging behavior in the home environment, and they always want suggestions about how to increase the appropriate behaviors and kind of decrease some of the problematic behaviors. We also are doing this training to support what your child is learning at the center. If we're working on skills and kind of tackling some of those things, we want to be able to share that with you and carry that across environments so that we can really maximize the benefit to your child. So the learning objectives for this training is we want you to understand why having consistent expectations are important, to be able to list the Pingree expectations and how you can apply them in your home, and to be able to incorporate the expectations throughout the home and in community activities. So a lot of times that's where we see problems occur. Over the years, there's been so many times where an individual is doing great here and they're following directions and they're doing everything they're supposed to at the center. And then we talk to the parents and they're like, oh, when we go to church or the playground, it's a nightmare. And so we really want you to be able to have these tools to follow through with expectations and increase appropriate behavior across settings. So we want to talk about a multi-tiered system of support. The Least Restrictive Behavior Intervention Manual that is put out by the Utah State Office of Education sets guidelines that we follow for the use of positive behavior intervention and supports and least restrictive interventions. So what we want to do center-wide and really just in general with treatment with individuals who are diagnosed with autism and other co-occurring diagnoses, we want to really start with the most positive interventions that we can. We want it to be least restrictive. We don't want to have to use physical management or really do anything that is negative or aversive to an individual. We really want to focus on those positive supports, build on them, and kind of increase appropriate behavior that way. And so the LRBI manual really sets out these great guidelines for that. And that's something too that I recommend everyone look at, especially as a parent, because it will give you more insight too as you transition into a school district about what types of supports are available and should be being used in classroom settings. And again, kind of those least restrictive interventions that educators should be using. So when we look at a multi-tiered system of support, we have 3 tiers. I think of it kind of as a pyramid. We want to set the foundation with tier 1. And so in tier 1, we use practices and systems that establish a foundation of regular, proactive support while preventing unwanted behaviors. And schools and centers, treatment centers, should be providing these universal supports to all students school-wide. So it's kind of the foundation that every treatment center, every school should have. In a lot of typical settings, this is comparable to like a 200 club or like all-stars, like your elementary school may have had this, where there are expectations that a school has, and then everybody is kind of held to that standard. And it doesn't matter if your child has a diagnosis or a disability or not, everybody is held to those equally. So that's kind of what we want to start with. And then tier 2 and tier 3, once we have those foundations and the basics of positive behaviors in place, if we're not seeing the outcomes that we want and we're seeing challenging behavior, that's when we start moving up these tiers and create more specialized interventions specific to an individual's like triggers or their specific behaviors. So how does this apply to Pingree? Our center expectations are our foundation of our tiered level of support. And in your home setting, your home-wide expectations will be the foundation for your tiered level of support. So when children display challenging behavior, the first step that we want to do is to evaluate if expectations and positive supports are in place and consistently used. So here at the center, if a teacher comes to me or a specialist comes to me and they're struggling with a client, or a child, we go back and we look at our basic expectations. And if we've taught those effectively, if we've reviewed those effectively, if we provided enough positive support for those before we would ever think of moving to anything that's more restrictive. This also helps with generalization of expectations. Like I mentioned just a minute ago, when our goal really is to transition individuals into less restrictive environments, and so into your local school districts, your neighborhood school, and your child will encounter these kind of school-wide expectations in every setting that they encounter. And so by us kind of establishing these and creating them, we're really preparing them for that transition to the less restrictive environment. We want to look at that carryover of strategies into the home setting and into different environments. And so if we can work on those here, you're working on the same expectations at home. Maybe we share those with other providers, caregivers, school settings. We can carry over these strategies and expectations into all environments that your child might encounter. So what are these expectations? A lot of talk about it, but what are they? They're very straightforward, very simple, and really apply to everybody. They're be kind, be safe, be flexible, and be ready to learn. And there's a little example of what one of our posters with our expectations looks like there as well. So the Pingree Expectations, they apply to both the children and staff. So this is something that we all hold each other to. We're all accountable for this. So the adults are, the children are, everybody that comes in the building, we hold accountable to these expectations. In your home, the expectations will apply to everyone in your home. So these aren't just expectations for your child. These aren't just your kids' rules. They're the rules for everybody and the expectations for everybody in your home environment, and that maybe even comes into your home. So at our center, the posters with expectations have specific definitions about what the expectations mean for each person and for each area. And so that is something, as you think about how you're going to create your own, you'll want to kind of keep in mind the different areas within your home that you may have specific definitions for and what it might mean for different people. So at the center, we have different definitions for visitors compared to the definitions we have for staff, compared to the definitions that we have for the children. So some examples here, we have posters for expectations in the elementary program, what being kind, being safe, being flexible, and being ready to learn means in each of those contexts. On the one side, there's in the elementary program. On the right-hand side, we have what the expectations are for staff. So for example, for staff, our expectation for being safe is that we stay attentive and engaged with the individuals that we're working with, that we model the behavior we want to see, that we respect confidentiality of the individuals that we're working with. For being ready to learn as employees, we do our best work. We set goals for ourselves for improvement. We ask for help if we need it. We follow supervisors' directions. For the elementary expectations, being safe is taking care of yourself, helping keep the room clean, staying calm and in your own space, using an inside voice. So you can see how the expectations are defined a little bit more clearly and relate to the individuals that we're focusing on. Here's a little home example that I'd created a while back for one of our clients. So for this expectation, it was a little bit broader, and it was just as a family what they were going to focus on. So for being kind, it was using nice words with mom and brothers and sisters, having soft hands and keeping the body to self, sharing a turn with siblings. Being safe was using toys and objects in a safe way, staying with mom or my family when I'm not at home, keeping my body calm in the car and wearing the seatbelts. Being ready to learn was related largely to following directions, and that could be for dinner or any activity. Being ready to go to school in the morning was challenging for this particular individual, and so that was one of the expectations for being ready to learn. And then being flexible, staying calm when things are unexpected or the schedule changes, and giving some strategies for what they can do. So saying, okay, taking breaths, counting to 10. Waiting is being flexible. So these are all just some examples for you to reference. Of course, these are going to be individualized for you and your family and whoever really comprises a part of your support system and network. So moving along, what does this mean for parents and siblings in a home environment? Again, everybody in the home is going to follow these expectations. Whenever I do this training, I always think back to my childhood and my mom and our kind of family rules and how it was like, everybody's going to do it. Everybody's going to do this. Parents are going to do it. Siblings are going to do it. Aunts and uncles that you maybe have, visiting in the home environment, they're going to be held to these expectations as well. Parents and family members can model and talk about the expectations with each other and with friends. This is really helpful too, because you can use the language of the expectations, which I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But when we're modeling the expectations for our children, they see it, they get that repetition, they hear the language, they see that we're practicing and engaging in those expectations as well. And it really provides the repetition that they need to really understand what the expectations are. Again, it helps teach that we are all held to the same expectations and we're modeling the behavior we're asking our children to engage in. So we're asking them to be safe. We're also being safe. We're asking them to be flexible. We also have to be flexible, which sometimes is challenging because I think sometimes we make exceptions to some of the expectations that we have for our families and family members. And it's kind of like, do as I say, not as I do. And in this model, we really want to make sure that everybody is doing the same thing. So for adult behavior, some examples of ways that you can incorporate this in your home. If someone helps you, even with small tasks throughout the day, you can thank them for being kind. You can be like, oh, thank you for handing me the milk. That was very kind of you. So you're using the language. If someone maybe wipes a spill or is sitting appropriately, you can thank them for being safe. If a family member completes a task you ask them to do, follows directions, is listening to a story you're reading them, thank them for being ready to learn. And if a family member needs to adjust what they're doing, needs to wait for something, or needs to change an appointment, thank them for being flexible. So really, we can apply all of these expectations to almost all behavior that we do every day. And it's a matter of just kind of getting in the habit of using the language so that we're consistently modeling that for our children and the individuals that we're working with as professionals. So what does this mean for your child? What are the types of behaviors that we might break down into these different categories? For being kind might involve taking turns, sharing toys, using kind words, keeping their body to themselves. Being safe might involve walking, keeping feet on the ground, again, keeping their body to themselves, listening to instructions, using the playground appropriately, using toys appropriately, keeping shoes on. This is a big one for a lot of our clients that we work with. Sitting on chairs, sitting on a couch, basically doing what they're supposed to be doing. When you break it down, is being safe. Being flexible for your child might mean being around someone new or different, which can be really challenging for the individuals we work with. Changing schedules or activities, which is also a tough one when we see a lot of challenging behavior crop up when an activity that was scheduled to happen didn't happen, or if there's kind of a routine that's followed all the time, gets interrupted. So we can definitely work on praising for being flexible when those things occur. Walking or driving a different way, you can praise for being flexible, wearing different clothing, completing a less preferred activity, waiting for a sibling to finish playing with a toy they want, maybe trying a new food or touching a new texture, or receiving a less preferred item. That's being flexible. And also just waiting in general. Waiting is really tough and really hard for so many of the children that we work with. And it's hard for us adults too. And so I think we can all kind of use more of that language of the expectations of kind of praising each other and giving each other feedback, of being flexible when we have to wait for things. And then finally, The last expectation, being ready to learn. What it might look like for your child is when they're following directions, they're demonstrating they're ready to learn. When they're sitting, when they're expected to sit, listening and responding when they're spoken to, and being quiet when asked to be quiet. Those are all behaviors that indicate they're ready to learn. So for home expectations, what you'll want to do is really sit down and create these expectations as a family. You can use be kind, be safe, be flexible, be ready to learn as kind of the broader expectations. And then you'll want to break those down for the behaviors that are meaningful to you and your family and kind of the specific behaviors that affect your child. Once you do this, you can post those expectations around your home. They don't have to be like cutesy, but I think sometimes it's fun when things are a little bit, cute or motivating to your child. So if there are particular characters from a cartoon that your child likes, or maybe there's color schemes that you have, you can definitely incorporate those on your posters that you put together. And you can definitely create expectations for different areas and activities within your home as well. So being safe might look different in the bathroom than it does in the kitchen. And so you might want to identify those specific behaviors that relate to those different areas. You can also create expectations for different activities. So it might be that you're really experiencing some challenging behavior in the car. So you might have car expectations that follow the same guidelines. Be kind, be safe, be flexible, be ready to learn. What does that mean in the car? Or, as I mentioned before, maybe out in community settings. So whether it's at the grocery store or maybe you're going to church with your child, you might have those specific expectations for those different environments. So after you've created your expectations and you've defined them, you're feeling pretty good about them, then we have to move to teaching the expectations. So it's not enough to just put together a poster and be like, okay, great, we have those defined, now we're good to go. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. We have to explicitly teach them. So expectations have to be formally taught. Here at the center, we try to incorporate teaching the expectations into our routine, and that's something that I also encourage you to do in your home environment. So here we try to build it into group times that occur every day. And we'll review each of the expectations, go through what the definition of that behavior is, and then incorporate some activities to make sure that the individual is really understanding what we're talking about in terms of the expectations and the behavior that's expected. In the home environment, you might want to build that into some, like maybe your morning routine. Maybe it's part of after you get dressed and before you have breakfast, you just review the expectations at the kitchen table or something like that. And then you might also review it at bedtime before you go to sleep. Maybe it's before you have a bedtime story. Maybe you even make a little social story with the expectations built in that you read every night before they go to bed. And again, you're just going to review each expectation, discuss what it means. And this also can be and should be adapted for your child and your family. And it can change as your child and their needs change. So I spent many years in a classroom as kind of a specialist in a classroom leading it. And I found that although the main expectations stayed the same each year, be kind, be safe, be flexible, be ready to learn, the individual definitions changed from year to year, depending on the behaviors that I was encountering in my classroom and the needs of a particular group of children that I had. So one year I had a group, for example, that they just were very busy and they love to run a lot. And so being safe, the expectation of walking feet, it was a big one that year and one that we emphasized a lot, where for another year that the group of clients that I had and individuals I was working with, that didn't really present as much of a concern, but climbing did. And so feet on the floor was a bigger concern at that time. So feel free to adapt and adjust those expectations as you see different behaviors and needs kind of crop up. You're never kind of stuck or bound to the specific definition. And really all behaviors, as I said before, kind of fall under the umbrella of those four basic broader definitions. So when you're teaching the expectations, I really recommend creating an activity or a game to kind of go along with each expectation so that you have a little bit more of a concrete way to represent it and to teach it. So sometimes individuals will take photos of their child doing the expectation. You might do like a little matching game of what is being safe and having like little images or pictures of safe behavior versus not safe behavior, or flexible behavior versus not flexible behavior. You'll want to practice examples and non-examples. I always put as appropriate because safe hands you'd want to practice. You might not want to practice unsafe hands or have a child engage in aggressive behavior. And so I would say use that with caution. Sometimes you just want to focus on the examples instead of the non-examples. And then you want to provide reinforcement for the skill and the behavior that you're working on. So initially, you're going to want to provide kind of a denser schedule of reinforcement. And so really what that means is when we're teaching a new skill, we want to make sure that we're providing praise and recognition and reinforcement and a reward for every time a child makes the correct response. And then after we know that we've really provided that feedback and that reinforcement to them, then we start fading out the reinforcement schedule. So initially it might feel like, oh man, I have to give them a reward or a little treat every single time. But once you've done that initially and kind of established that they understand the skill that you've taught and the expectation that you've taught, then you can fade it back out and it's not going to be every time that they get a treat for it. You also want to make it fun, like make the expectation something that's a fun part of your home routines. We have a little song that we've sung in the past with our individuals. It's pretty straightforward. It goes like this. Pardon my singing voice. It's not the best. Be kind, be safe, be flexible. Be kind, be safe, be flexible. Be kind, be safe, be flexible, be ready to learn. So you can incorporate little songs like that. You can make up your own fun song. You can come up with a little family expectation dance. Really just find any way to make it fun. The more fun it is, the more likely that you're going to reference it, use it, and that your child is going to be motivated to engage and follow the expectation. So after we've taught it, we have to practice, 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 right? So we explicitly taught it, now we're practicing. Provide consistent and frequent review. So we never really stop practicing these expectations at the center. We teach the expectations formally, and then we review them daily and frequently and use the language throughout the day really consistently. So again, incorporate a review of the expectations into your daily routines. Earlier, I spoke about maybe you're doing it in the morning and then or at bedtime, but you may want to do it like every time before you get into the car or before you go into an environment that you know will be challenging. At the center, one way that we practice and reinforce for following the expectations is that we use Be Your Best tickets. Basically, when we catch a child following an expectation, they can earn a ticket and then they can exchange it for a small treat. They'll bring it up to the front office. Every classroom has a little bucket with their number on it. They'll put their ticket into the bucket. They'll get a small treat. And then each week, we'll select a student of the week from each classroom, and they'll get announced and they'll get put up on our Pingree 200 club board. And then once a vertical or horizontal row is filled in, and those individuals on that row receive kind of a bigger party. And in the past, we've done things like bounce houses or different activities for our clients. So that's kind of a lot, but you can consider a similar system for the home environment. It doesn't have to be that complicated. You can definitely have something that kind of mirrors what we're doing at the center. Another consideration with the Pingree tickets is that in the past, we've had individuals who are really motivated by the tickets at the center and kind of the recognition that they get for it here. And so when there's challenging behavior that's happening in the home environment, we've provided the parents with these tickets to use when they followed an expectation in the home environment. They can earn the ticket at home, bring it back to school, and exchange it for something at school, so that we're providing additional reinforcement and feedback and praise for following those expectations in the home setting. So that's something that we've also done in the past to kind of support reinforcing these across environments and settings. If you do use the system at home, or you're interested in kind of incorporating tickets for reinforcing, you always want to explain why they earned it. And if they can, have them kind of repeat the expectation back to you and why they earned it, of course, to the best of their ability. You may need to adapt this based on their verbal ability or communicative ability. Usually, if I see a child here with a ticket, I always want to know, why did you earn it? What did you do? A lot of times, if they're not able to verbally communicate, I can look at the ticket. I can see which box was checked. Was it being kind, being safe? And I can get a little bit of information to kind of praise and prompt. You can also use little visuals for individuals who maybe aren't able to communicate. And so maybe you have a little representation of safe, flexible, ready to learn, being kind, and they can touch the picture depending on what expectation they were following. You can post the tickets, have them share their tickets with other family members. And again, this is just really to get everybody on the same page, using the language and providing reinforcement for that desirable behavior that we really want to see. Again, you want to have some formal times that you're doing this. And so this, again, might be at set times throughout the day, maybe at breakfast, after they get home from school, at bedtime. You also want to do this informally, and this means any opportunity that you observe a desirable behavior. And when you really think about this, there are a lot of opportunities to provide feedback and reinforcement for what our children are doing right. I think we often kind of default to focusing on the disruptive behavior that we don't want to see, or we're like, oh no, they're screaming right now. Why are they screaming? But maybe they were quiet for the last 30 minutes and doing what they were supposed to be doing, and you only happen to notice or respond when you heard the screaming. So we really want to make sure that we're catching them being good and doing what they're supposed to be doing. And again, I really feel like generally most of the day, a lot of the children are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And multiple people can provide reinforcement in the household. So this is really cool too. Like, it doesn't just have to be mom doing it or dad doing it. It can be everybody that interacts with that child, providing that feedback and reinforcement for following the expectations. And that's really nice, because then everybody's on the same team, and it kind of removes that burden from it just being one person that kind of feels like they have to be the one doing it and following through with it. Talked about this a lot, but you want to use the language of the expectations frequently. It will feel a little funny at first when you're like, oh, thank you for being kind, or your feet are down, you're being so safe, you're sitting so nicely, that's so safe, or man, you're being so flexible when they didn't have the cereal you liked. It will feel a little bit funny initially, but the more you practice it, the more natural it will start feeling. And it will also really help contribute to a more positive environment, because when we reference these expectations all the time, we're really focusing on those positive aspects, right? And so it kind of just creates this environment where that's what we're focusing on, the desirable things, and we're really thanking people and providing that positive feedback. A lot of times when I'm doing observations in classrooms or providing feedback to specialists here at the center, when I go into a classroom and I hear individuals or children using the language of the expectations, I know that they've been successfully taught and reinforced in that classroom. And it just makes me so proud every time. It's really, really motivating and reinforcing to me when I can see that they're really understanding those concepts and they're using the language as well. And so that's something that I kind of encourage everybody to strive toward. And that's why I say, like, use the language frequently, reinforce it as much as you can. When they're doing a behavior you want, make sure you're tying it back to those expectations. I want to talk a little bit about expectations compared to reprimands. So one reason that we really want to focus on expectations and really defining the positive behavior and the desirable behavior is that using expectations really provides the specific feedback about desirable behavior and gives them specific information about what they're doing right. So sometimes when you hear kind of an arbitrary, like, good job, you don't really know what it is you're doing, or it's not really tied to anything. And so if we can specifically provide that feedback, oh, you're walking, and tie it to an expectation, that's being safe, it will really help your child understand what is expected of them. I think a lot of times we kind of assume that, oh, they know what they're supposed to be doing, or they're just being naughty. We don't know that unless we provide that specific feedback and we make sure that we're giving them the information about what they're doing right. So again, an example of this would be, thank you for walking. You are being safe. When you use reprimands, it does not provide the child information about what we want them to do. It does not tell them what to do. It tells them what we want them to not do, but then they don't have any information or context of what the desirable behavior is. So for example, if we say, stop running, that's not safe. Okay, well, what are they supposed to do? So that's one reason why reprimands can be a little bit more challenging and don't really provide the feedback to help our learners kind of grow. Whenever possible, we want to focus on the desired behavior and provide information about what we want to see. So some examples are walking feet versus running, soft hands instead of not hitting, inside voice instead of you're too loud. So we really want to make sure that they know what they should be doing instead of what they shouldn't be doing. Another thing that is kind of funny and that I've just noticed kind of anecdotally over the years is that when we focus on the behavior that we want a child to stop or that we don't want to see, I almost feel like that's what they hear. So if I say, oh, even with praise, if I say, thank you for not running, the last thing they hear is running. So in my mind, then I just think it might just repeat like running, running, running. And so then they hear running, they think that's what they should be doing. If we switch it and we say, thank you for having walking feet, the desirable behavior we want, that's the last thing they hear. That's the thing they're going to focus on. It's a little bit tricky. Sometimes there are behaviors, when you think about reframing them into kind of the desirable behavior, it can be challenging, but there's always a desirable behavior and a way to reframe it. It just might take a little bit of creativity or brainstorming. Okay, so a little bit more about expectations versus reprimands. Reprimands and having a child lose something because of a disruptive behavior often results in emotional responding and can make a challenging situation worse. And so that's another reason that as much as possible, we want to avoid just using reprimands or having loss of a preferred item kind of as a consequence for challenging behavior. A lot of times if they're already upset and then we say, oh, that's it, no more iPad, that's not going to make anything better. And so we really want to do our best to kind of avoid that. And again, focus on reinforcing the expectations and building on that desirable behavior. When you use reprimands and loss of a preferred item, it also brings additional attention to the less desirable behavior and can inadvertently lead to bootleg reinforcement. And what that means is that you might accidentally increase and reinforce the behavior that you were trying to reduce or eliminate. And so as much as possible, you want to avoid providing a lot of like reprimands and additional attention to those challenging behaviors, especially if you tend to do that more than giving that attention to the more desirable behaviors. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about transition from losing to earning. So it's the same piece, kind of with the loss of a preferred item and that emotional responding. At the Pingree Center, our focus is really on group reinforcement systems that are based on earning and not losing. So historically, we have used some systems that have incorporated kind of a response cost or a loss in them. And a lot of school systems will also use these. So like red, yellow, green systems where they're on green, they're doing great. Ooh, maybe they hit a friend. Now they move to yellow. That's really a punishment-based system, and they're moving down. And so we really want to avoid that as much as possible and really focus more on earning systems. So with a level up or an earning system, a child is only receiving reinforcement for engaging in the behavior we want. And so when we catch them being good, then they're earning something for being good instead of losing something. But what about disruptive behavior? How do we address it? When a child is engaging in challenging behavior, rather than reprimanding or kind of engaging in that emotional response, try to remain calm and neutral. And if you can, if you have other people in the environment that's maybe a sibling or another adult, try to catch somebody else engaging in desirable behavior and provide them feedback about what they're doing that's safe or kind, or even just to kind of talk to if you need to divert your attention away from the challenging behavior, as long as it is safe to do so and your child's not injuring themselves or injuring somebody else. You want to try to neutrally redirect your child to a more functional activity or a behavior that can help them engage in the desirable behavior that relates to an expectation. So for example, if they're climbing, you might just neutrally help them down from the table. And once they have their feet back on the ground, then you might praise them for the safe choice of feet on the ground. So you wouldn't necessarily say anything to them or reprimand them or tell them to get down from the table or anything like that. You would just neutrally guide them down and provide praise once they're doing what you want them to do. Another strategy that I think can be helpful, especially in a home setting, sometimes there's a lot, probably all the time, there's a lot going on, and it's hard to not just react and respond to things. And so I know a lot of times at the center, when there's challenging behavior, we don't say anything, we're kind of neutral. We might use gestures or other visual prompts to kind of redirect a child, but that can be really tough, especially if you don't have kind of the training and environment to consistently be doing that. So one way that you can address that is that you can label what an item is used for. So if you have a hard time not saying anything and maybe your child is climbing, you can, maybe they're climbing on the couch, you can neutrally redirect and say, couches are for sitting, and label what the function of an item is. So, and you can also do this if maybe they're using something in an inappropriate way. So if you have a little trampoline and you have a couch, they're jumping on the couch, you neutrally redirect them to the trampoline and say, trampolines are for jumping, couches are for sitting. So you're giving them the information, again, about the function and what the desirable behavior is. So is this immediately going to work? We're going to teach the expectations, reinforce them. Is it automatically going to be perfect? No. Sometimes we're going to need to wait or provide them with support to engage in a safer behavior. It's not going to always instantly happen or automatically happen. And even after we've taught these expectations and maybe they're making progress and most of the time they're engaging in them, everybody has a bad day. Behaviors don't stay static all the time. Like there's going to be an ebb and flow with challenging behavior. And so you just want to be patient and stay consistent with implementing the expectations. At the Pingree Center, we use safety care, and that is a de-escalation program that helps us create positive environment and really use a lot of preventative and proactive strategies for addressing, preventing and addressing crisis situations when they occur. With safety care, there are some strategies for de-escalation, and the wait strategy is one of the strategies that we use when children are really escalated. The wait strategy is exactly what it sounds like. Sometimes you have to wait out a behavior while calmly monitoring the situation for safety until a child starts de-escalating. The acronym to kind of remember for wait is, why am I talking? There's a tendency, I think, when individuals get escalated to talk to them more like, what's wrong? Tell me what's wrong. And you start kind of bombarding a child with information when they're really escalated, they're not listening and they're not going to be able to respond to your request or what you're asking. And so sometimes it's best to just wait until they're a little bit calmer and then step in to kind of redirect to get back to the expectations. Some children may engage in more challenging behavior. For these kiddos, they may need a more individualized behavior intervention plan. And so if you think back to kind of the multi-tiered system of support, we may need to move to a tier 2 or tier 3, where it's very specific to them. Maybe it's on a very specific schedule where every minute we're providing feedback about something. There's specific individualized charts and visuals or communication built in for your child. But even if we have to do that, that never means that we stop teaching and reinforcing the expectations. In fact, if we do have to move to a tier 2 or tier 3, usually it means that we're going to create a more specific plan targeting those specific expectations for your child. And so we're like, oh, this behavior is truly a dangerous behavior. So we really need to create a plan around being safe and these specific safe behaviors. So I'm going to give a brief little overview of an example of how you might implement a reinforcement system. And this is just a very generic kind of basic outline. You could create a chart with your child's name and spaces for stickers, points, or cards earned. You'll want to have a set timeline that you're going to catch your child engaging in an expectation. I think in a home environment, I try to be really realistic about it. Again, there's a lot going on. Maybe you say every 30 minutes, you're going to catch them one time, or every hour, you're going to catch them one time engaging in one of the expectations or in a behavior that aligns with the expectations. If they do, you catch them, you praise, you give them their sticker, you post it on their chart so they can see it. You might have a set timeline for checking in to see how many stickers were earned. So for example, if we were doing a 30-minute schedule, we might try to target each expectation, one for every 30 minutes. And then after every 2 hours, you might check in and review the expectations they followed and provide reinforcement for following the expectation. And then if they earned all 4, maybe they get a special reward. So initially, again, without this reinforcement system, when we're teaching the expectations, you might provide a little treat every time they're doing it. And then this is more as you start fading out that consistent reinforcement. So the stickers or the tickets might start taking on some of that value. So they have to do more and earn those 4 stickers before they earn a reward. And again, you can adapt and adjust this to what your child needs to help them be successful. And then you'll provide reinforcement if they met all expectations, and then you can start over and repeat the process again. Some potential challenges with this is sometimes your child might have a bad day. It might be tough. And so they might not be able to earn all 4 of their stickers or all of the expectations. And so if that's the case, I would look at kind of incorporating like a level system of rewards. So maybe if they were able to meet one expectation, they get a smaller reward. Maybe they earn, for example, like 1 Skittle or 1 small thing for following 1. And then if they were able to earn all 4, it would be something that's much larger. So maybe they get 5 minutes of iPad time, or they get like a little bag of Skittles or something like that. So again, you really want to tailor this to your child, what their preferences are, and kind of what their threshold is for being able to delay their rewards and then also to follow the expectations and engage in appropriate behavior. You can also use visual representation of what each level means so it's clear to your child. So maybe if you have little stickers, you could have like 1 sticker equals one little Skittle, 2 stickers equals 2 Skittles, 3 equals 3, 4 equals a bag, so that they can see the more they earn, the more tickets they earn, the more they're following those expectations, the better the reward. I've just included some examples of what you might use for stickers. So you could make little pictures that say like, I'm being kind, I'm being safe, I'm being flexible. Again, these ones have a little Pingree butterfly, but if your child loves certain characters, loves shapes, loves really whatever their interest is, you can make these stickers kind of surrounding that. Next, I'm going to talk about reinforcement across environments. A way to help kind of generalize these expectations and make sure that you have success with these is you may want to review the expectations before a child is expected to engage in them. You may not necessarily have to review all 4 of the expectations. So for example, if you're going on a little like play date with a cousin or a neighbor or something like that, and you know that your child really struggles with take turns with a peer, you might really review being kind and how to take turns and how that relates to being kind before you go on that play date. You can make smaller versions of your posters or take a photo on your phone so that you can reference and show it to your child when you're out and about or in the community. And this is a big one. Share your expectations with other caregivers. So share it with grandparents, share it with babysitters, share it with daycare providers or anybody else that your child may be coming in contact with so that they can follow these expectations as well. And then another fun strategy you could try as well is taking a video of your child engaging in the expectations. So maybe if they really struggle with sitting and being ready to learn, you could take a little video of a time when they actually are sitting so that you can watch it with them when you're reviewing the expectations and they can see themselves being successful and successfully displaying the expectation and the behavior you want them to. So kind of as a wrap up, having consistent expectations will help create a positive environment where desirable behaviors are recognized and rewarded. And I think this is so important to me. And I think, again, at the center, it's critical that we have a positive and supportive environment where we really are rewarding and reinforcing the desirable behaviors. And I think that's equally important in a home environment. And so I just really encourage everybody to kind of take this, experiment with it. If you have any questions or need any suggestions or support with kind of getting started, I'm happy to help. So always feel free to reach out or email me at Sarah with an HB at valleycares.com. And I'm happy to collaborate with you all. All right. Well, thank you all for participating. Like I said, just reach out if you have any questions. And I look forward to you all trying expectations out in your home environment.